We are back live with another Johnnie Torch live broadcast, number 113. Today we're going to take a look at the Luke Cage second season. Yes, a little bit later than most people, but I just watched the Luke Cage second season, binged it in about a week, in preparation of Iron Fist season 2 and Daredevil season 3 that are coming up rapidly. Iron Fist has been out for a couple of weeks now at this point, so I'm going to be starting Iron Fist Season 2, but had to start with Luke Cage Season 2. My Netflix subscription, unfortunately, I'm going to have to pay for a second month because I could have got them all in if I waited a couple of weeks. Could have got them all in under 1 month, but hey, that's the way it works. Daredevil Season 3 wasn't announced for October 19th, officially anyway, until about, I don't know, a week ago. And it was by then too late for me to plan ahead. But to lay a little bit of groundwork, I generally liked Luke Cage Season 1. I really like the actors. Mike Coulter does a good job here. Personally, I don't know if I like him as much, but playing Luke Cage, he is excellent. I see a lot of his stuff on Twitter that seems kind of provocative, let's put it that way. Simone Missick is perfect as Misty Knight. I would watch a Misty Knight series. She is just captivating in this role. And we got a lot to talk about, so we won't waste too much time. I didn't do a season-wide video for Cloak and Dagger. And that kind of disappoints me because after investing so much time in it, I would like to find something to talk about with it. But it was generally very underwhelming. And the good thing is, even if there are parts of Luke Cage Season 2 that are underwhelming, there's still plenty to talk about. I would struggle to find something to talk about with Cloak and Dagger. Other than it was mildly disappointing. Luke Cage Season 2, I would say, is better than Luke Cage Season 1. They addressed a lot of the problems that I had with not only Luke Cage Season 1, but most of the Netflix series. Most of the Netflix series are very meandering. They are very scant of focus. They go off on a lot of rabbit trails that don't really lead anywhere, and you kind of look back and say, well, where was that going? And maybe it was going somewhere, but it isn't immediately apparent. There was some problems with this season, but I am going to get to that later in the show. Let me get to the things I liked about it first. But generally, overall, I think there were improvements in the pacing. The problem that Netflix has, in my opinion, is a lot of showing. There's a lot of telling and not showing. There's a lot of builds up to some great action, but the action scenes are not cinematic quality that I kind of would like to see. I think the action scenes this season were a lot improved. I think that the pacing was much better. There were many subplots that were better than the previous shows, not just Luke Cage Season 1, but the previous Netflix shows. A lot of the subplots were interesting, and, they felt like they went somewhere. They went to their normal resolution. Another thing I complain about a lot with Netflix shows is that there is a lot of talking heads. There is a lot of scenes of, and as I said before, I think in one of my Torch News roundups, as a comic book creator, as a cartoonist, one of the things you look for is drawing too many talking head scenes. When you're having discussions or monologues or things that might be exposition, might be just a conversation that needs to be had, you have to be careful that you don't frame it in such a way where it's boring to the audience. And you don't want to put too many of them in a row. You want to pace it with action. You want to make sure there's enough action because it is, of course, a comic book. It's a superhero genre where you have to, get that aspect out as often as possible. I think they did better here, although there was a few stodgy scenes. But for the most part, I applaud them for not having too many dialogue-heavy scenes that go on for 10 or 15 minutes. Again, there were a few times where that happens, but over the course of a 13-episode season, it was paced much better. And I feel that generally this was a step up, not only over season 1 of Luke Cage, but over a lot of the Netflix seasons. I've seen most of the shows. I haven't seen Punisher or second season of Jessica Jones, but from what I've seen, this was a step up. Okay, let's talk about how the season starts with Luke Cage. And again, this is Johnnie Torch Live, so there's no notes. I did not make copious notes during this. I just am going off of memory. So if something I omit, again, bring it up in the comments below. I'll be welcoming comments and hopefully talking about some of the aspects that interested you or maybe didn't interest you. Let me know in the comments below what you thought about Luke Cage Season 2. But where we find Luke Cage at the beginning of the season, he is sort of full of himself. I thought that was pretty cool. The kid that plays DW, he was pretty funny as the comic relief, but not really. He didn't dominate screen time or anything. But he's sort of pushing Luke into the public eye, making him sort of a social media trender, and Luke kind of gets full of himself, and I really love it because the Luke Cage series itself does tie into sort of biblical issues. And that was one of the things I liked a lot about the first season. His father being a minister, and we'll get into that in a second. But pride comes before a fall, as the Bible says. And Luke feels indestructible at the beginning of the season, and that was great because it builds up the villain of the piece. Well, one of the villains. We'll get into him a lot more in a second, but Bushmaster, who is also a comic villain from the Luke Cage comics, is the main physical adversary, let's put it that way, of the story, and he is with similar powers to Luke Cage that are not completely explained, but for example, he has probably the equal strength, but instead of being bulletproof, he can sort of stop bullets from going all the way into his body and just sort of reject them when they get to a certain point. It's an interesting concept that doesn't really completely explained. We get a little of his backstory. When he was a kid, he was injected with something that, again, for whatever reason, apparently made him very strong, and then with the combination of various roots and nightshade made him, very durable, let's say that way, if not completely resilient. And the building up of Bushmaster, along with the building up of Luke Cage's confidence, it made for a really good clash when it finally happens. And Bushmaster pretty much brushes him off, in their first meeting, brushes him off like a fly. And then in the second meeting, when they're on the bridge, it's a lot more of a close contest. But Luke ends up getting knocked into the river there. Really cool stuff. Really cool action. Like I said, the action seemed to be improved. Still talking about Luke Cage, I am kind of disappointed that they haven't given him a costume. Now, again, Luke Cage is the easiest costume to do because really all they have to give him is a yellow jacket. I'm thinking something along the lines of what Tom Welling wore in Smallville, where they just gave him like a red jacket, and that was enough to sort of say, look, he's not wearing a costume. But he is wearing something that is close enough that you feel that maybe it's a precursor of what a costume would look like. It's kind of the same thing here, where if they'd given him, and I'm not talking about a canary yellow, bright jacket. I'm talking about, so a mustard color, a bright tan, something that would look, reminiscent of the comic costume of Luke Cage. Because of all of the Netflix characters, well, Jessica Jones notwithstanding, because she doesn't wear a costume, period, but he is the easiest to probably translate without going full board into a costume. Just give him a yellow jacket and he'll be fine. They still want to kind of use the hoodie motif, which I guess is because of its real world connotations. But um, talking about that real world connotations, I was very pleased. And another reason what elevates the season a lot was there didn't seem to be any of the trappings of, I guess, for lack of a better term, social justice politics. They didn't really seem to go overboard in that area. The last episode had a couple of comments about Trump, but it wasn't, it was supposedly played for laughs. It wasn't a commentary running throughout the whole season. Also, what my usual complaints are is that a lot of mainly black projects like Luke Cage or like Black Panther is there's always a lot of stereotypical things that happen. Where, as I said, in Black Panther, there is sort of the dopey white guy. In Luke Cage season 1, there was Scarif, I guess was his name, Frank Wally, who was a great actor. He was sort of the shady white guy. In this season, I didn't particularly see anything that was a stereotype or sort of a black production trope where they, sort of use the old stereotypes. I was very impressed with that. And again, it felt a lot more of a naturalized story. It was an organic story. It wasn't like they came out with an agenda hoping to focus on some social ill, which was refreshing going up against the first season, which I thought was moderately going for that, and Black Lightning, which I felt was possibly even more going into the trope of, again, the white character that betrays them, the white character that's blatantly racist. They didn't go for any of that here in this season, and like I said, quite refreshing, and was very happy with that. Let's take a look first before we go more into the plot. Let's go into the characters. Misty Knight. Let's talk about Misty Knight. The fallout over her arm being lost in Defenders. Again, she's a great character and a great actress. I was really impressed by her all season. The Rand Company provides the replacement arm, the prosthetic arm, or whatever you'd want to call it. And I'm as anti-PC as they come. I mean, you can say anything to me and it's fine, and I don't I don't get up in arms over it. But there was so many one-arm jokes for poor Misty. It was like at a point I was ready to fire the remote at the TV because there's a point of insensitivity that even I will be offended by. And they kind of pushed it really hard for the first 3 episodes of this season. But then she gets the robotic arm, and not entirely flashy. I like it, especially as a proto arm. I imagine they could soup it up more in the future, but it did come off somewhat as looking like a glove, I think, because they had her try to get used to it for like the first and second episode. I kind of would expect her to need to practice with it more. They had she couldn't open a drawer with it and stuff. And they didn't really jump right into the deep end, but I kind of think that maybe that kind of stuff would have lasted a little bit longer than it did. But again, no problems. The transition was fine. We got the cameo of Colleen Wing, which was a lot of fun. You get to see her return. Let's talk about some of the cameos. We got her back for an episode. We got Danny Rand back as the Iron Fist for an episode. And man, I'm telling you, that was probably my favorite episode because that's what I really want a show. I mean, I don't need a Iron Fist show, and I don't need a Luke Cage show. I really would love to see a Power Man and Iron Fist team up show. I would really love to see Heroes for Hire, and we get a little groundwork laid to that in this season. Heroes for Hire. Another Marvel character named Piranha uh, originally hires Luke, and that was an interesting thing. Again, this is full spoilers, so if you have any, if you haven't seen the series yet, then you'd probably want to see it before watching the rest of the video. But he gets killed, and it's again. Let's stay on track here though. But yeah, interesting to see their relationship, Danny Rand and Luke Cage. It's a lot of fun. I think that there would be more fun to be had if they joined forces at some point. The way this season left, and from what I'm guessing is going to happen in Iron Fist season 2, I don't think they're going to be doing Heroes for Hire anytime soon. We'll get to that in a second. Again, the cameos, we had Stan Lee cameo, a picture of Stan in the background. That's kind of what they do in the Netflix shows. They don't really give Stan a cameo. I'm not sure exactly how many more cameos Stan's going to do. I haven't heard anything about the upcoming films because I believe he did film a bunch of them in a row at one time for insertion in other movies. Now, I don't know if he's up for doing that again or they already have them for the foreseeable future, but we'll have to wait and see. All right. As far as let's get a little more into plot here with the characters. We have, of course, Black Mariah Stokes, played by Alfre Woodard, and she is a real trip. She's a real trip. I wouldn't say she's a sympathetic villain, but the depths at which she's a survivor, you have to give her credit for that, if nothing else, because she's really a repulsive human being when you get down to it. Now, one of the story, like I said, there was a lot of subplots that were very interesting. Now, one of them was Mariah and her pretty daughter, Tilda, who she reconnects with mostly, at first at least, for political reasons. And it's just a, gut-wrenching scene further on in the show when she sort of outright rejects her daughter. And her daughter, Tilda, again, a very pretty girl and a good actress. Also, there was so many ways they could have played her character, and they did make her very sort of unpredictable, but you understood how she wound up where she was. She ends up going over to the side of Bushmaster because Mariah doesn't have really any compulsion not to completely wipe out her enemies. And Bushmaster's uncle and several members of his family or friends are murdered by Mariah, and she literally incinerates him, the uncle. El Nazi, I think his name is, which is, it sounds like you're saying El Nazi, but that's what they called him. I can't help that. But yeah, and she's just ruthless, Black Mariah. And this, of course, turns Shades against her, this basically incinerating El Nazi alive. And again, she turns her own daughter against her, and she joins Bushmaster, Tilda. And it's very interesting because Shades has, and again, I don't know, I can't remember all the actors' names, but the actor who plays Shades is also very good. He was very convincing and compelling in his storyline. Another subplot was his friendship and quasi relationship with Comanche, which was another of Mariah's underlings. There was a close relationship between them two. They suggested how close. I'm not really going to get into that, but and the fact that he had to kill Comanche was sort of the first step, because Shades has rules and Mariah don't. And Shades was sort of pushed to the brink by having to kill Comanche, and then seeing Mariah's ruthlessness against the Bushmaster clan, so to speak, it basically turns him against her. I honestly, you know, it almost sounds kind of like a sexist thing, but I don't mean it that way. But I really don't know what he saw in her. I mean, she's obviously several years older than him, not really the most attractive woman, but he was still honestly in love with her. And that's what makes it even more tragic in Shade's storyline, was that not only did he kill his best friend, he had to turn against the woman that he legitimately loved. It's a tragic thing that I kind of hoped he would come out on top, but he ends up getting arrested at the end of it, and apparently is just, going to do serious jail time. As far as Mariah is concerned, the fact that Tilda is the one that kills her, that's what I mean. That was poetic. I think I seriously would have given this season a terrible rating if it wasn't for the fact that Mariah did finally die at the end of the season, because she really needed to go, and even her daughter knew it. And to just kind of, again, the last episode of the season, again, I'm not talking about things I don't like yet, but I think the last episode kind of, it ended on a whimper and not on a bang, but they did manage to put Mariah out to pasture properly. That her daughter ended up giving her, the kiss of death, and this ends up putting Mariah down for the count. And again, the story kind of wants you to feel something for her. She's such a despicable character. I don't know if it's possible to feel something for her, but even Luke basically doesn't provide any comfort being with her at the end. I mean, he stays with her at the end, but basically tells her she's going to burn in hell. Basically, that's what he's kind of saying to her. So much for Mariah, and it was good to see that she got her comeuppance. Let's go back to Bushmaster. Again, I don't remember this actor's name. He was fantastic. He was great as Bushmaster. I love the Caribbean accent, although admittedly, I couldn't understand what half of his crew was saying half the time. And I admire that they didn't give you subtitles, because when they're speaking English with an accent, I don't think they should give you subtitles. Subtitles are only if it's a foreign accent that you have no idea what they're saying. But it's like an Irish brogue, is that what they call it, or an Irish lilt or something? But it's sort of that kind of accent that you really can't, comprehend with both hands. You know what I mean? You only get one hand on at any given time. But I loved hearing it. It was really cool, to give some flavor to the show. It's not all just about Harlem. These guys are coming over from Jamaica, and it added a lot of flavor to it. I thought was pretty cool. You can see where Bushmaster was coming from. His family was ruined by, and it cracked me every time, Dillard and he was Stokes is her name. It was really cool when you have that kind of con-like single-minded revenge plot. And I really liked the way he went about it. He was no nonsense. Again, I think his character went out with a fizzle, though, and not with a bang. He had been taking the herbs way too much. And we're told, at least by Tilda, that this is going to have some terrible consequence on his mind, if not also his body. But I don't really see anything happening to his mind. He seemed mentally still in control. And physically, he, it looked like it had taken its toll on him to the point where he had to leave town and left. And, Tilda takes it upon herself to again, I think it was appropriate to be the one to put out Mariah, but he just kind of goes off into oblivion, and as Mike Tyson would say, fade into oblivion, because I don't really know what was to happen with him after that. His second or lieutenant or what have you sort of sticks around just to make sure that the deed is done. But again, it leaves Bushmaster in the lurch that I don't know if he's supposed to come back, that he really has no business coming back because his mother's death is avenged, his family's deaths are avenged. And, it's interesting. Like I said, the subplots really kept me interested. Let's take a look and see what else here. We have, let's talk about Claire. Claire's role in the show. I've always said that Claire worked best. No, actually, I said Claire worked best in Iron Fist. I think that, to be honest with you, I really didn't see her working out too well with Luke Cage. So I think the way the relationship sort of fizzled out made sense to me. I always saw Luke better with Misty, and I didn't change my mind. After this season, I think they're best together. I would think that Claire apparently tries to come back at the end, and Luke rejects her. Doesn't let her into the club. Apparently, they're done. I guess. Well, probably if there is a Luke Cage season 3, which I guess is doubtful, seeing as how the Netflix shows, the Marvel Netflix shows, are all going to be under the banner of Disney now, because Disney's got a streaming service. I don't know if there is a future for them on Disney because they are, rated M for mature. But she opens the door for Luke's father. I can't remember his name, but Luke's dad. We'll just go with that. And the great Reg E. Cathy, who has passed on, and they dedicated the show to him at the end. I thought he was going to be sort of the stereotypical, bad minister, hypocrite, overbearing father that's, really a piece of crap. But again, they subverted my expectations and they didn't go there. They actually had him being a fully formed character. They didn't really pin him down on his infidelities, which was something I thought would have happened more, because Diamondback was his son, and that was sort of the main storyline of the first season. Basically was supposedly Diamondback was the main adversary for Luke Cage, and we don't get into that too much during the show. The fact that he's a flawed human being seems to be all that's the main topic between him and Luke, and it's really up to Claire to bring this healing between them two. But then again, it's sort of at the cost of her own relationship with Luke. So that's interesting. Like I said, I think Claire works the best with Iron Fist. I mean, she had the most purpose in the Iron Fist original season, but I don't really know. Like I said, I kind of would see Luke more with Misty than with Claire. Claire just seems more of the clingy, hanger-on girlfriend, and not really the equal that Luke Cage really needs, and I would say is in Misty Knight. We'll get into them a little bit more at the very end here before we finish up. But again, talking about, I was really impressed with the way they did treat religion in the show. If you know me, anybody knows me, knows that I am a devout Christian, and I honestly don't like it when I see, shows having a go at religion, and especially Christianity, because it's always portrayed negatively. It's always portrayed as all ministers are hypocrites, and it's something to scoff at by the main characters in the show. But again, it was treated with a lot of respect here. Luke's dad, although flawed, is a flawed human being, and he has to pay for what he's done to a higher authority, but he is, still a man of the cloth, and he treats it very seriously. It's not mocked. Obviously, Black Mariah being the basically Misty calls her Satan. Basically, is the character that she is. She doesn't really cotton to the religious aspect, but um, the characters all pray non-ironically, and again, Jesus' name is used, and respectfully used. So I didn't have a problem with that, and I think it was done very well and very tastefully. Um, I wish it was done like that more often. I mean, I wish we could have a lot more. Daredevil is also a religious hero that falls back on Catholicism, and I would like to see more of that. And mostly when you see Daredevil, he's usually in the confessional, just saying the bad stuff he's done. I would like to see a little more focus on the positive aspects that religion has in his life, not just, oh, I did something wrong and I feel guilty and I have to cleanse myself of it. I mean, that's part of it. That's part of life and a godly life, but it's not really the be all end all. There is, positive aspects that you got to highlight. Let's see. What haven't we touched on yet? Let's see. But I think we've pretty much handled all the characters. We have, there was some interesting things going on in the police department. Some of the ongoings there. As I said, Frank Wally has another cameo in one of the episodes, showing the corruption and how that kind of was something that could have worked on Misty Knight. That she might have followed suit the way Scarf did. I guess that's his name. And in the same way, I kind of thought they would play more to Tilda becoming her mother at the end of the show. They don't really go so far, but again, let's get to the end of the show now. Luke inherits the Paradise, the club there, and they go so far as to actually have the final scene from The Godfather play out between Luke, Sugar, and Misty. Misty playing the role of Kay in that scene. And it's great because Godfather is one of the all-time greats. But again, DW really takes Luke to task on this because Luke he's trying to play both sides now. He's not beyond making some shady connections. And he went to there's the five families. He went to the Italian family, I guess, and he got pretty much all the heads of the families in line under him where they're going to be allowed to, eke out a profit, so to speak, but not be able to run roughshod over Harlem the way that it was going after Black Mariah was taken out of the picture. So again, DW kind of takes him to task, and it makes you wonder just how far they are going to take this storyline, provided they can continue with it, because Luke would not really be a superhero if he takes over this role as Godfather, which apparently he's embracing. A very unusual thing, I thought, to happen here. Again, with the things I didn't like, let's talk about the things I didn't like. As I said, I'm not sure that is a great storyline for Luke going forward, having him be the godfather of crime and sort of trying to keep one hand on the criminals and still sort of be the protector of Harlem. I don't know how that's going to work. You got to prove it to me that that's going to work out as a third season. Again, I'm not a big fan of R-rated material. Some of it was okay, but a lot of it was heavy, like the violence, again, with beheadings. The headings were a bit much, and I didn't really. I mean, I'm not so queasy that the gunshots and stuff like that were too bad, but some of the gunshots, the killings were a little too much. The incineration of the guy was also kind of. I don't know. I just am not a big fan of graphic violence. So again, this kind of takes like a kind of a point off the graphic violence. The language again was pretty foul. All the Netflix shows have cursing that is, borderline unacceptable. I don't think this season of Luke Cage was worse than some of the other seasons. I don't think it was that bad, but then again, um, it's kind of unnecessary. I don't really like it when we have an abundance of cursing. But again, they didn't. I don't think they overdid it, especially compared to some of the other shows. I think maybe Jessica Jones, maybe Daredevil were a little bit more strong because, Pop wouldn't like the swearing. He wouldn't. And yeah, they keep Pop's memory alive. That was pretty cool in the swear jar. They had Luke say "Sweet Christmas" probably more in this season than they did in the first season and Defenders combined, which was a welcome, addition because that's his, you know, catchphrase, so to speak. Again, some of the subject matter was kind of heavy between Mariah and Tilda. We're talking about a couple of subjects that are a little touchy and are a little uncomfortable that I probably could have done without, or at least maybe if they handled it in a more, PG rated manner, we wouldn't have, maybe had it so upfront. It wouldn't have been quite as powerful that way, maybe. But again, kind of uncomfortable. Some of the things that, I probably didn't like too much. So there you go. I think we just about have it there with Luke Cage season 2. Again, overall, I'm going to try to think of a ranking here, a rating, I should say. Ranking, I don't know. I would say, yeah, this was probably better than from the shows I've watched. I like Daredevil season 2 and Iron Fist the best. I would say this is maybe third. I would say I like Iron Fist, Daredevil season 2, and Luke Cage season 2. That's the way it ranks so far. Again, we've got Iron Fist season 2 coming up. We've got Daredevil season 3 coming up. Really excited for these because I think they are getting better, even though they are still, they're still not quite there yet. I'm, if anybody knows me, knows I'm not. I'm a firm believer in making superhero shows accessible to all. I'm not a big fan of R-rated material for superhero stuff. Again, we did have some situations, I guess, at the beginning that was, a little inappropriate as well for the youngins. Me personally, I fast forward past that stuff, so I don't see any of those scenes. But yeah, that's the stuff that kind of brings it down for me a little bit. I would give Luke Cage season 2 3 stars out of 5. Yeah, 3 stars out of 5. Uh, I'm pretty happy with it. I think it was a step above, like I said, about half the other Netflix Marvel fare. But yeah, they still have a ways to go, I think, to really have me all in. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below, and check out the link in the description below if you want to follow me on Twitter, or check out my comic, The Adventures of Bullets, Bourbon, Private Eye. So until next we meet, once again, this is Johnnie Torch reminding you, sweet Christmas, and I'll be with you again real soon.